Welcome back. I'm Melinda Kucsera, your indie fantasy author, and today I'm reading Chapter 15 from Curse Breaker Enchanted. So let's go. Chapter 15. Grigori squared his shoulders and followed Jurlo. If the commander wanted an admission of guilt or regret, he had a long wait. Once the kid shows up, they'll know I'm right. You're awfully smug, Jurlo said as he passed his office without sparing it a glance. Self-satisfied and a job well done, yes, but not smug. Grigori smiled. The commander's earned at least one I told you so, and I can't wait to deliver it. What do you hope to gain by this? What I said on the beach. The kid's got problems, but he's not fragile. He won't break if you push him, and we must push him. He's got something inside him none of us understands, and we won't if we don't test him and discover his limits. Grigori tapped his pocket where a list of further tests rested. Jurlo didn't comment or give any sign of whether he agreed. The commander hid his thoughts behind an expressionless facade as they turned down a corridor with little to recommend it. The air grew musty, and the click of the two rangers' souls sounded ominous in the quiet. A helmed statue glared a challenge at them as they passed it. "Where are we going, sir?" Jurlo answered by knocking on a door. Captain of the Guards was stenciled on that iron-banded affair. From within, someone shouted, and Jurlo pushed the door open, revealing two desks covered in papers. Nice to know the commander had company in his endless war against paperwork. Unlike Jurlo's office, this one had almost no decor at all, but it made up for that lack with weaponry. Racked on each wall, there were all kinds of edged playthings. Spears, staves, axe, pikes. They all had a place here. Since plate armor belonged to the knights, the guards wore boiled leather or mail tunics. Piles of both occupied opposite corners of the room, ready to square off at a moment's notice, and a depiction of the Queen of All Trees hung amid the trappings of war, as if she belonged there. Grigori shook off her eyeless stare. "What can I do for you?" asked a guardsman in his late 20s, rising from behind a desk. He adjusted his rumpled uniform of dark blue tunic and trousers, drawing Grigori's eyes to the insignia stitched on the fellow's right pec. Two black spears crossed over a white barboot, marking the man as part of the guards. Real bar boots rested against each of the desks, so their wide-shaped slits faced Grigori. How could anyone wear such a close-fitting metal helmet? One good bop on its metal dome would give the unfortunate wearer a headache. Glad the rangers used lighter armor, Grigori dismissed the helm. A ranger wearing that steel helmet would incite the metal-hating enchanted forest to murder. "Actually, I came to offer you some help." Jurlo leaned over the other desk and picked up a file. He flashed it to the guard. "May I? You came to look at the cold case file?" Grigori nodded as he flipped through the pages. "One in particular vexes me." "Only one?" The guard's brows rose in surprise. If you stuck him in a crowd, he'd blend right into it. This guard must be a secretary. Jurlo shrugged. "If I had a heart, they'd all tug on it. But since rumor claims I lack that organ, I'm spared such pain." Jurlo gestured to the file and waved it at the nameless guardsman perched on the edge of the opposite desk. "Nulthir and I meet weekly to discuss these things. We keep each other apprised of developing situations and odd cases." The commander gave Grigori a hard stare, inviting him to make the obvious leap in logic. Grigori nodded, catching on to what Jurlo left unsaid. The two men met to talk so the commander could control what the guards knew about Sarn. Since the guards policed the indentured, they likely glimpsed the kid coming and going. Sarn was a secret all the rangers kept from the populace at large, or they tried to when the stupid kid cooperated. Jurlo pulled a quarter-inch stack of pages from the file with a flourish. "Here they are. You recall these?" He passed the pages in question to Nulthir, who scanned them, then handed them back with a sad nod. Jurlo shoved them at Grigori. "Look at these and tell me what you think." Each of the 27 pages in his hand represented a kid who had vanished in the last 5 years. All the missing were males between the ages of 16 and 20. The snatched teens were from the working class, judging by the addresses. The average height of male Shiarans topped out at 5'10", but all the missing boys were over 6 feet tall. Now that was a curious detail. Shiari had a long history of immigration before Cadron Ironwood closed the border and programmed it to keep everyone out. Thanks to immigration, Shiarans came in a variety of skin tones, from corpse pale to jet black and every shade in between. The kidnapper had plenty of victims to choose from since Mount Eredrin had a lot of young people, yet he or she had snatched light-skinned boys. This is getting more and more interesting by the moment. Grigori flipped back to the beginning and cursed as a profile built in his head. It matched Sarn's vital stats in every way save one. He had radiant green eyes, and no one knew he existed except the Rangers, and the noble fool who owned him. Is the kid in danger? Of course he is. This is Sarn. He drags trouble around in his wake. 5 years ago, Vic number 1 went missing 3 days after Sarn turned 16. Then 5 unlucky boys of the same age and description vanished in the following 11 months. The pattern repeated each year. What did the perpetrator do with these boys? And why is there an 8-week gap between the disappearances? Grigori shook his head. So far this year, only 3 boys had gone missing. They were all 20, just like a certain green-eyed pain in his neck. After a quick check, he tallied up the months and nodded. If the pattern held true, the 4th boy would disappear sometime in July, the 5th in September, and the 6th in November. The perpetrator must know about Sarn. The pattern indicates he does, but what about the guards? Grigori met Jurlo's gaze, but again, his boss gave nothing away. Perhaps guilt colored his perceptions because Grigori dropped his gaze to the page in front of him and stared at a sketch of a boy with a familiar facial scar. His gut clenched. Someone searching for Sarn and leaving missing boys in his wake. It's a chilling pattern, isn't it? Jurlo said, taking the prize for understatement of the century. Hell yeah, I've got nephews in this age range, thanks to Ranispara's sisters and their fecundity. Grigori gripped the pages in his hands. I know, for their sake I brought this to your attention. Jurlo's hard stare approved the subterfuge. Perhaps the guards weren't aware of the connection between the missing boys and the Ranger's indentured servant. Is there more? Grigori looked at Nulthir, who nodded and got up from his perch. The captain of the guards flipped open a chest. He rifled through it and pulled out a thicker file. As he handed it across to Grigori, Nulthir grimaced. If you know anything about what the hell is going on, I urge you to tell me at once. Grigori nodded. 27 is a lot. A few boys going missing is one thing, but this? Grigori brandished the file. Is a definite pattern, pointing to something nefarious. You've got whatever help I can give. We Rangers can't operate inside the mountain, Jurlo warned. But a little information gathering never hurt anyone, now did it? The commander had addressed his closing remarks to Nulthir, who nodded. I don't see how it could, as long as we're copied on everything. This is our investigation. Nulthir sighed, and I have to deal with the grieving relatives. Done and done. If you've nothing to add, we'll take our leave. Nulthir said nothing as he collapsed into the padded chair behind his desk. He looked worn around the edges. For a long moment, the captain of the guards blinked at his interrupted correspondence before searching for his quill. Jurlo swung the door open and ushered Grigori out before either could say what they were thinking. How could this fiend know about Sarn? The file in Grigori's sweating hand was a millstone, crushing him with worry. 5 years ago, the kid had healed up enough to need occupation, so Ranispara had taken him on patrol. Could the kidnapper have seen the kid then? As they entered Jurlo's office, reptilian eyes glared at Grigori, demanding an answer. He sat surrounded by Jurlo's newest acquisition, a quartet of man-sized dragons. The commander's obsession had gone way beyond good taste, but it was his office, and Jurlo could surround himself with depictions of giant backed-winged serpents if he chose. It would be nice if he left a dragon-free zone for visitors, though. But the answer was yes. Someone could have seen Sarn then. Grigori cursed, and for once Jurlo let him. The commander's steady gaze confirmed his thoughts ran on a parallel track. You agree these disappearances are too regular to be a coincidence. Grigori bounced the file on his knee. No argument here. Boys go missing every January, March, May, July, September, and November, as regularly as Mount Eredron's bells. Worse still, the 6 boys who disappear each year are always the same age as Sarn. That's not a coincidence. That's a message. Agreed. Reports of the boys who vanished in November all arrived within 3 days of the kid's birthday. Once is a coincidence. 5 is a warning. Jurlo squared the stack of papers so it lay even with the 2 piles flanking him. What's this person or persons doing with them? Is he kidnapping young men for kicks? We need to find out. Do you have a theory? Silence rolled a tense blanket over them. There were only 2 ways kidnapping could end, death or slavery. Shiari had a profitable skin trade, flourishing despite the illegality of it. Will we find a pile of bodies somewhere? I'm not sure I can handle such a gruesome sight. Grigori shifted the file, but it still weighed him down. I don't know. We have to do something. If there's someone out there making these boys disappear, we must stop him. We can't let him get his hands on Sarn. Grigori squeezed the file until his knuckles ached. We must prevent the kid from falling into the hands of another psychopath. Bad enough it had happened once. Grigori rubbed his eyes to wipe away the images, and his fingers came away wet. One glance could have saved everyone a lot of grief, and he'd regret that for the rest of his life. How long have you known about this? Jirlo collapsed into a chair behind his desk. He picked up a dragon-shaped inkwell, then set it down again. Not long. Nolthair only took over as captain in late January, and those meetings I mentioned were his idea. Oh, I had meetings with his predecessor, but they were more of a quarterly thing. He brought this to my attention maybe a month ago, when it became apparent there was a pattern. I asked him to do some digging to see if there were others, and you're looking at the results. Grigori drummed his fingers on the file. Another 3 victims would vanish before the year ended unless someone stopped this. You want me to find this crate before we find Sarn? Jirlo wagged a finger at him. I want us, the Rangers, to end this. Period. Can we put the kid under armed guard day and night in the meantime? Jirlo covered his face with his hands. We could, but I don't want the kid to know about this. He has enough problems. But how can we keep him safe when we don't know where he goes by day? Jirlo turned his dragon-shaped inkwell, and its eyes bored into Grigori. We don't have to. The kid's difficult to find because of where he goes. And where is that? Reread the file and you'll understand. As Grigori leafed through the case summaries a second time, he looked up, startled by a sudden realization. Lord Jorunth had indentured Sarn 6 years ago. His indentured status restricted the kid's movements in and around the mountain stronghold, but none of the 27 missing boys were indentured. The kid lives with the rest of the indentured in the lower quarters. Either the kidnapper doesn't know that or can't go there himself. Jirlo nodded. You hit on my working theory. If he were operating in the lower quarters, we might not have found out about the disappearances at all. How do you know Sarn goes down there? Jirlo showed his teeth and a predator's imitation of a smile, then let the strange expression go before it thoroughly creeped Grigori out. I've had people tail him often enough to be sure. There are reports of the kid using the most trafficked entrances to the place over the years. And no, I don't know exactly where in that rat's nest he lives. Grigori drummed his fingers on that file. Catching this creep would be tough. They had no proof of anything. All they had were a lot of suppositions. Jirlo looked Grigori square in the eye. No more tests. Do you hear me? Grigori looked away and nodded. I'll keep both eyes on the kid as often as I can, and I'll get on this right now, unless you have something else. There's one more thing. Silence followed Jirlo's ominous announcement. Shadows stretched long fingers from the edges of the cluttered office, drawing Grigori's eyes to the floor-to-ceiling dragon statues. He shuddered as their glowing crystal eyes fixed on him. Jirlo leaned back in his bureaucratic throne, and his hands caressed its dragon head armrests. Do you know what an irreplaceable asset is? Grigori could have taken a stab at defining the term, but this was Jirlo's show, and the commander was building up to something big, so he shook his head. The kid, Sarn, is an irreplaceable asset. You'd better pray he returns in good health. If he doesn't, you'll inherit his debt, and you can bet your ass Lord Jorunth Nalshira will prosecute you. Jirlo's hooded eyes tracked every twitch of his quarry. Under Title 42, Chapter 21, Section 1982, you're facing at least 60 years of hard labor to work off the useful lifespan of the irreplaceable asset you lost. Grigori goggled at his boss. 60 years of hard labor because of one stupid test? Jirlo swiveled his chair to the left, lifted a dusty tome off a nearby stack, and shoved it at Grigori. Its leather cover strained to hold onto 3-inch stack of papers it housed. You're looking at the entire Shi'aran legal code. Those loose pages are recent amendments. You'll find the relevant laws highlighted on pages 1299 to 1303. Read the marked passages subtitled Indentured and Irreplaceable Assets if you don't believe me, or I could quote them to you. Your choice. Grigori pawed at the cracking cover with nerveless fingers. No way. They wouldn't send me to prison. This is a grave matter, one you aren't taking seriously enough. I thought our chat 3 years ago had ended this issue, but I was wrong. The kid's not irreplaceable. They must have a dozen boys like him at the flesh market. As soon as the words left Grigori's mouth, he wanted to retract them. They were the exact wrong thing to say, and the flesh market itself was a horrible thing. No, there's no one else like the kid. Not at the flesh market, maybe not even in this country. If you don't believe me, swing by their stalls. All you'll find are pale imitations. How do you know? Grigori shoved the legal code away from him. Jirlo raised a mocking brow. What do you think? No, it was too horrible to contemplate. How could Jirlo visit those slave pens? Grigori was appalled. When did you go there? After what I thought was the last test. 3 years ago, the kid crawled back so dizzy from a concussion he couldn't stand up. I needed to know how much trouble you were in if he didn't recover. But he did recover. There's not a mark on him from that test. Yes, and I thought I'd put the fear of God in you then, but you spirited him off again, and this time the stakes are higher. Jurlo stabbed the title stamped on the book's cover with his index finger. Mark my words, the kid is irreplaceable for more reasons than you realize. I can't protect you from Lord Joran's wrath. I warned you 3 years ago. You should have heeded my warning. Well, Grigori was heeding it now. That stupid kid had better return in one piece. Grigori picked up the file and rose from his chair, feeling flayed by their conversation. Is there anything else? He asked, keeping his voice firm, even though inside he was quaking. Jurlo waved at his office door, dismissing him. Keep this all quiet for now, but see what you can find out. I want to break the disappearances to the others in stages. I don't want anyone to jump to any conclusions until we know more about what's going on. Grigori nodded. He could picture Ranaspara and Nolo's reactions to the kidnappings. They'd both stroke over it, but there was no need to worry about that yet. What about the kid? He should know to watch his back. Jurlo shook his head. Don't tell Sarn about any of this. Why? The kid has a right to know. The kid has enough problems. I'm ordering you to say nothing to him about any of what we discussed. Grigori met his boss's steely stare, but dropped his gaze when the commander's eyes bored into him. Yes, sir. Good, Jurlo said, dismissing him. Grigori closed the inner door to Jurlo's office with more force than necessary. A sick feeling erupted in the pit of his stomach, pushing him into a lumbering run. What if the kidnapper had been on the boat earlier today? It was possible, given the 2 months between reported disappearances. Grigori poured on more speed, taking the twists and turns, shouting for folks to make a hole. What if instead of a test, I handed the kid a one-way ticket to death or slavery? That was chapter 15, so we got Jurlo's punishment and some information about some situations that are going on under Mount Arendron. So we'll see more about these disappearances and the perpetrator of it in later books. That is finally resolved in Curse Breaker Trapped and Curse Breaker Revealed to finally find out who is doing it. Although there's hints as early as Curse Breaker Falls or Curse Breaker Sundered. Sarn actually runs into the perpetrator, but well, I won't go into detail about that. They have a run-in. His sister also has a run-in with the perpetrator and more of a confrontation with that person in, I think it's his Angelic Keeper Fallen. So that's something else to look out for. But yeah, the perpetrator actually goes after Sarn in Curse Breaker Trapped, starting in Curse Breaker Trapped. And that is all wrapped up in a way that I never saw coming at the end of Curse Breaker Revealed. And that's Curse Breaker Trapped is book 8, and Curse Breaker Revealed is book 9. That actually just came out in September. Curse Breaker Revealed came out on September 27th. And the box set for books 7 through 9 is going to come out sometime between now and Christmas? I'm not sure. Part of it was published in Kindle Vella, so I'm just waiting for that part to come down as per Amazon's terms of services. It can't be part of a box set if it's in Kindle Vella, so as soon as they take it off their site, I can put it in the box set and release it. So I'm just waiting for that to happen. I think I'm actually going to stop here and read chapter 16 to you next time because I want to save some of my voice to do an update on NaNoWriMo, what I'm writing, my perspective on this fight I seem to be in with the main character of the Robin of Larkspur series, which is the book I'm currently working on. So I want to do like a separate program just talking about that. So I need some voice left for that. So you can get Curse Breaker Enchanted if you want to read ahead or read along or listen to it. If you want to listen to it, it's auto-narrated by a voice that Google created. I happen to think that voice sounds better than mine does. It needed a whole lot less editing. But you can also pick those up. Curse Breaker Enchanted is right now free in all its formats except paperback and hardcover because those involve printing, and the stores that sell the print version, they all want their cuts, so it's a little bit on the expensive side. Unfortunately, I don't have much control over the pricing of anything that's in print. You can also pick up the box set, as I mentioned, of books 1 to 3. I think that'll run you about $5 on most platforms, and then you get the first 3 books of the Curse Breaker series to indulge in, and they are a lot of fun. Book 2 is from Jurlo's perspective, and it picks up from where we end in Curse Breaker Enchanted, and the 3rd book, Curse Breaker Faceted, is Sarn is your main character again, and he and Ren are spying on people, and Ren is not enjoying it. So that one is just a really fun romp with monsters and a lot of magic, and that was a lot of fun to write that book. So I'll see you back next week or in the next program where I'm going to talk about NaNoWriMo, what I'm currently writing, where things are going. Yeah, so see you in the next broadcast. I'm Melinda Kucsera, your indie fantasy author. Have a great week. Remember to like, share, follow, all the things, because it really helps. Thank you so much for listening.